Hey, everybody, welcome to That Expert Show, where you help run the show. I'm Anna Canzano. We've got a great episode lined up for you today. We're talking today about empty nesting, and this applies to really anybody out there with kids. If you are approaching that stage of life, if you are living that stage of life, or even if it's a long way off in the distance, maybe you're dreading the day that you become an empty nester. Maybe you're looking forward to it. As our producer said today, maybe you've got an advent calendar counting down to the days that your kids actually get out of the nest. I don't know, whatever your situation, we'll be addressing that spectrum of perspectives today. We've got a fantastic expert lined up for you. The sponsor of today's episode is Reflex Knee Clinic. If you are in knee pain, or if you know somebody who is, you've got to talk to the folks at Reflex Knee Clinic. These guys are the specialists in knee pain. They can help you take away your knee pain and get you back to life. Stick around and I'll tell you a very personal story about why I love these guys and why I really enjoy spreading the word about the work that they do. Our guest today is a writer whose work on empty nesting has been featured on CNN as well as the New York Times. She was a guest on the Katie Couric Show, and she is the founder of a very popular Facebook group. It's kind of a support group called the Empty Nesters Community. Joining us live from Long Beach, California is Sharon Greenthal. Sharon, thanks so much for being with us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
This is an amazing topic because I know that, as somebody who's now in her 40s and who has little ones, I know that the idea of empty nesting is really far off in the future. But I know that a lot of people out there, a lot of my friends are struggling with the idea that their kids are now off to college and they kind of don't know what to do with themselves. Let's lead off with a question from Tracy on Facebook. She says that her kids flew the coop many years ago, but she went through a period where she just didn't know her role anymore. She was a mom who was the Girl Scout leader, the PTA person, the room mother. She was that mom. She wants to know your suggestions for a successful transition for the parent, because this was a big one for her.
That was actually my situation as well. I was a stay-at-home mom for 20 years. My son left a home, and I just kind of went, okay, now what? I had been thinking about it sort of, a little bit, but once he left, then I really kicked it into high gear. And the thing that finally led me to what I have been doing for the past 10 years, which is writing, is I went back to my childhood and what I enjoyed doing. I loved writing from the time I was a little girl, and in fact, I was a writing major in college. I majored in English, and I decided to give it a go and, start writing about what I know best, which was being a mom and being an empty nester. And it led me to so many different things. So my suggestion is I actually have a blog post up on my blog, which is at SharonGreenthal.com, which is called What to Do with Yourself in the Empty Nest. And it gives you some suggestions like, think about what your passions were when you were a child. Try things. Don't be afraid to give things, that you've never done before a try. Maybe take a class in something you think's interesting, but you don't know anything about. Reach out to people in your community. Make sure that you're not isolating yourself and waiting for people to come to you. You have to make an effort to get out and connect with other people as well. It's important to give yourself time because it's not going to happen overnight. It took me about a year, and it takes most people, a good 6 months to a year to get started on the next phase of their life. So,
well, it's interesting too because, a lot of people might think that this episode only applies to somebody who's in the empty nest stage or approaching it. But I really want to address, what it's like for people who are a few years out from that process, because as you know, this is a big transition in your life. What sort of things can you do well before your kid is leaving home to prepare for that day and maybe, lessen the brunt of the pain?
Yeah, when your youngest child leaves home, it's as big of a change in your life as when you bring home your first baby, and it really does upend everything that you've known for however long you've been a parent with children in your house. I spent a couple of years before my son left experimenting with different ideas. I went back to school to get an interior design degree, and that was fun, but it really wasn't what I should have been doing. I worked as an administrative assistant for a while doing insurance work, which was lucrative, but I didn't love it. So if you have the time and you have the energy to sort of try different things, you may already have a job. So it may not be about working. It may be about finding a passion, something that you really enjoy doing. Start an herb garden. Get a dog. I mean, my dog is a huge part of my life now, and having a dog to bond with before your children leave can really help, or a cat, or whatever animal you like to have in your home. It's good to start thinking about it beforehand. Don't pretend it's not going to happen, because it is. Even if it doesn't happen right on schedule, eventually your children are going to leave home, and you want them to.
Well, and part of the dynamic, I think, too, is, if you've got a partner in raising your kids, you've been so focused for, 18, 20, 25 years, whatever it is, raising your children. Like, you've been teammates in this process. But I also hear those situations where, like, the kids leave and suddenly the parents look at each other and go, oh, who are you? Like, I know I married you, or I know we coupled up years ago, but I don't really even know who you are anymore after all of these years of being focused on the kids. So how do we apply that concept to, things that you can do now?
Yeah, you should definitely pay attention to your spouse. That's a big part of, if you are in a relationship, if you are married or living with someone, whatever your situation, if you're in a relationship with someone, don't wait until your kids leave to start to reconnect with your spouse, because it's true. You look at each other and go, huh? Who are you? But I have heard from a lot of people, and I've had this experience too, that when the kids leave, their marriages improve dramatically, because you don't have all of that tumult around you. You don't have the disagreements about your kids. You don't have your kids' problems in your face all the time. You can really reconnect with your husband, your wife, your spouse, your partner, and really improve your marriage or your relationship. Mine has never been better. We've been married for 30 years and we couldn't be happier. And I think I see that with a lot of people. Then there's the flip side, where people look at each other and say, you know what? I'm ready to go. I'm ready to move on. This has been great, but I need a new start. So be honest with yourself, but don't give up on your marriage. It's going to be very strange at first.
I think it's an important point, because, if you look at the current statistics on the divorce rate, actually in the last 2 decades or so, the number of people, the percentage of couples who are getting married in the last 20 years or so, their stay together rate is like at a 60 to 70% rate, which is, counter to what people think, 50% of marriages fail. The actual reason, and I read this in a book about marriage, the actual reason the divorce rate is at 50% is because of the people who are baby boomers. The kids have left the home, and they're looking at each other going, I haven't actually liked you for a number of years, and we've just stayed together for the kids. So it's, the older generation that is getting divorced that is driving up the divorce rate, for what it's worth. So this is such an important conversation to have for people to maintain healthy marriages and relationships with their partners throughout the course of their life.
Absolutely. It's essential. And, kids can really screw up a relationship. I love them, or, whatever the situation is, they come between the parents, and it's so hard to maintain especially through those older teen years, when there's so much going on in their, activities and their football games or whatever it is, homework. It's really hard to stay emotionally connected as a man and a woman. You're just a husband and a wife. And so, or a man, or whatever your partnership is, to not be parents and to be partners. So yeah, I agree. You gotta keep doing what you can do to make it better.
One of the most important, I think, aspects of parenting, at whatever stage, is being active with your kids. And I know that my husband was an athlete in his younger years, and we've got a 2 and a 4-year-old now, and really enjoys, being able to roughhouse with the girls, and obviously wants to teach them how to ride bikes and be the dad that he wants to be. He was not able to do that before we found found the folks at Reflex Knee Clinic. He had a tremendous amount of knee pain just from his genetics and from his activities as an athlete in his younger years. He really couldn't even go for a run without his knees swelling up. He'd had 3 knee surgeries. He'd had, microfracture surgery. He busted both patellar tendons, but it was the folks at Reflex Knee Clinic that helped him with non-surgical methods like PRP and stem cell treatment that several years ago he got those treatments, and all of a sudden, it's crazy. I don't want to say it's a miracle, but it is kind of a miracle. He can run again, and he can ride a bike and do all of these things and go for runs without that kind of knee pain. So I would encourage you, if you are in knee pain or if you know somebody who is, talk to the folks at Reflex Knee Clinic. Go to reflexknees.com. You can read his case study and just have a consultation with them to see how they might be able to help you get back to life. Sharon, I would assume that, part of your diagnosis or part of your treatment plan for folks who are approaching empty nest stage is to find a way to be, active with your partner or on your own.
Yeah, staying physically active and getting outside and doing things that make you feel good physically is very important, especially as you get older anyway. So it's a good idea to do that. So, and also because when your kids leave home, it gives you a lot of free time to do things that you probably weren't doing when you had your kids around. And so you want to feel good and you want to feel energetic and you want to feel, strong. So yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Building resilience, you're talking about being, strength. Building resilience in your kids is something that I am uber focused on right now while they're still young. We do also have a 16-year-old, my stepdaughter, and I want her to be strong as well. And she's looking at going off to college. And this is a common theme for parents. Christina on Twitter, for example, says that her goal is to raise an independent and confident adult. She says it's so hard to stand back and let them fail. What is your advice for people, for kids that are going off and you just know they're going to make decisions that aren't wise because that's just what you do when you're 18, 19, and 20 years old? And where is that balance between smothering them and checking in with them to make sure that they're still healthy, mentally healthy and okay?
I had a rule when my kids left for college, which was I did not contact them. I waited for them to contact me. As much as I would like to have called them 3 times a day and say, hey, everything okay? I really worked very, very hard to allow them the freedom to call me when they wanted to. And your kids will call you because they won't have anybody else to talk to really the first couple of weeks that they can really, open up to. But if you sense that there's something going on with your child at college, if you as a mother or father you can get a feeling if you think there's something more than just the normal adjustment problems. I don't think there's anything wrong with suggesting to go to the student services and find a counselor or if they have a best friend from home that they can really confide in, to open up and talk about what's going on. My son did have a hard time his first year in college, and we worked very hard not to intrude, but of course we certainly overreached with him. And I would say it was probably not the best thing we could have done. We should have let him sort of figure it out for himself more. And I would, if I could give any advice, it would be to try to hold back a little bit. But if you do sense there's something seriously wrong going on, then there's nothing wrong with suggesting that. And even going to see your child at school and in his environment or her environment can be very helpful because it can reassure you that even though they sound terrible on the phone with you, otherwise they're doing okay. Kids do tend to sort of dump all over their parents, so to speak, and leave them feeling horrible and worried when in fact they're just having a moment. And so you need to be able to regulate whether your kid is really in trouble or not.
Yeah, that's tricky. I mean, depending on the location of where they're at and,
Yes.
your ability to get there as well. You bring
That's
up an
true.
interesting point as far as the kid coming and going from college, and that was actually something that One person on social media wanted to know, Michelle on Facebook says she's been an empty nester for 10 months, or she is an empty nester 10 months out of the year while her son is away at college. She wants to know, how does she adjust when he comes home and then leaves again? It feels like a yo-yo. It's a lot of up and down.
It's pretty hard. You look forward to them coming home, but what you're expecting when they come home, especially the first year or two, is that they're going to be that high school kid that you sent off to college, and they're not. They've lived on their own for a year. They've been making their own decisions. They've been regulating their own diets. They've been following their own timetables, and parents have to approach them with a little bit less management once they're in college. You may have like a generalized curfew, like if you're going to stay out, give me a call, that kind of thing. And you may say, I need you to take out your trash, whatever it is, but you can't parent them the same way that you did when they were in high school and younger, because they aren't the same person anymore. They're growing up, and that's what you want them to do. So when they come home, whether it's in college or whether it's after college, if they have to come back as a boomerang kids, quote unquote, you have to approach it with a very different attitude and assume that they're going to do the right thing. I always figured when my kids were young, they were going to probably do the wrong thing just because that's, that's what they do. But once they're adults, you really have to give them the room to do the right thing and not manage their lives.
So that's an interesting question, because a lot of people, when I posted about this topic, said, actually, like, we thought we would be empty nesters right now, but we're not. And people were, they fell on every end of the spectrum about this. Some were really happy to have their kids back because they miss them so much, and they kind of have an open door, like, stay as long as you want. These days, it's really hard with the cost of living for kids to strike out on their own and have enough money to live independently, depending on whether or not they have a job and whether that job is going to cover the bills. Other parents were like, I can't believe you're with us and you're going to be with us for an indefinite period of time. We were really looking forward to this stage of being an empty nester, and now you're here. So those are interesting dynamics. Do you recommend that parents, like you're saying, treat your kid more like a roommate? Do you recommend that parents have kids when they come back, share in paying the bills, and I mean, maybe they're not doing chores necessarily, but they're more of a true roommate in that fashion in paying for things?
No, actually, my son did come home for a period of time after we had already downsized to our empty nest home. So just imagine this: you think you're empty nesters, you've downsized your home. I live in a small house near the beach, and this was a specific decision we made, and then my son came home. If you charge them rent and things like that and other expenses, you're only slowing down the process of getting them out of the house. Okay, so what I would recommend is, maybe you charge them $500 or whatever it is you want to charge them. Don't spend that money. Put it away in a savings account for your child so that he or she can get out as quickly as possible. The last thing you want is to have your adult child living with you long term. Believe me, it doesn't work. At least it didn't work for us. And I love my son very much, but living with him was very difficult. And now he's a few blocks away, and we're all much happier. So,
yeah. A healthy distance.
I think every family is different, and I think depending on your financial situation, you might need the extra income to pay your mortgage. I don't know, but I would suggest, if you don't have to use that money, to put it away, and then one day say, look, here's your nest egg, so you can go out and find your own apartment now, because they do get comfortable.
So that's interesting. So you're suggesting like taking that rent money, whatever amount it is, and setting it aside in a savings account. But is that an open process? Are you telling the kid like, hey, I'm going to do this, or you just kind of surprise them with it at the end and go, hey, all that money you gave me to live here?
You have to know your own kid, because some kids might say, wait a minute, if you're putting it away, then why should I give it to you if you don't need it? But I think it's a really great trick to get them out of the house without too much trouble.
Oh, that makes me think of that kid. I think it was on the East Coast whose parents, I think, filed a lawsuit against him, and it was just sort of this sad but hilarious situation where They had written
Yeah,
all these
my
notes to
son was
him,
living
tried
with
to
us at
evict
that
him.
time. It was it was pretty funny.
Yeah, like an
We're
empty
like,
nester's
look,
nightmare.
see, this could happen, but no.
Yeah,
Yeah, it gets very comfortable. Why should they leave? They've got meals, they've got a roof over their heads. A lot of them are very comfortable living at home, but get them out.
Interesting. Get them out. Teresa, who's watching live, Teresa, thanks for watching, says that their youngest moved out about 5 or 6 years ago. This is interesting. She says that with social media, none of her kids call or check in much because the social media has taken the place of that. They're like, hey, I can just post, you follow me on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. You can see what's going on in my life. She says she's still struggling with that emptiness. How can she learn to cope?
Well, first of all, you have to understand that 20 and 30-something young adults don't call. They don't call anyone. It's not just you. They don't use the phone that way. They use it for texting. They use it for social media. I mean, I think you can certainly say to your child, hey, listen, I like seeing your posts on Instagram, but I'd really like to hear from you to me. And whether it's a text or a phone call every so often, I don't think there's anything wrong with asking your kid to keep in touch. But they don't really, they don't work the way we do. I mean, I pick up the phone and call people. They don't do that. And if they do, it's a FaceTime call and you may not be ready for that. So, you have every right to say to your kid, please, just check in with me. I want to hear your voice. I want to, read your words just directly to me. Yeah.
Oh, man, you're hilarious. It's interesting because other folks are chiming in with their own advice who've clearly been through this process. Tina, who's also watching live on Facebook, hi, Tina, recommends that you start volunteering in schools and get your kid fixed that way. Like maybe it's not your own kid, but, you can use the time that you have now to help other children who may need some healthy role models.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Anything you can do, if children are your passion, definitely get out there and work with kids. There are so many kids in need. I know there are all different programs. There's something called CASA that's for foster children where you are an advocate in court. There's a lot of different opportunities to work with children. So if that's what you may not want to work with children. You may be done with children. You may want to do something completely different. Senior homes are always looking for people to come in and hang out with their residents and bring cookies or whatever it is. You find what makes you feel good to give back if that's what you want to do. But the most important thing is to get out in the community and be part of things. There's something called meetup.com, which always comes up in my Facebook group, where you can go on and find people who have specific interests, like medieval reenactment groups or, whatever it might be. And you might be able to find people who love the same exact things you do, which would be great.
But what if you're an introvert? I mean, a lot of this depends, you're telling people to get out there, but, what if not everybody is that into the social scene?
Well, I am an introvert, so I can answer this personally. I'm not somebody who loves parties. I'm not somebody who loves big crowds. I'm not great at sort of going out and introducing myself. I found social media was a wonderful way to connect with people when I first had an empty nest. I have a nice group of friends who I have sort of grown up with my kids that I'm very connected to. But I found a whole new community through my writing and made really terrific friends that way. And it was all virtual. And I did meet up with them eventually at conferences and so on and so forth. But join a community like my Facebook group, the Empty Nest community, and connect with people who are in the same situation you are. We in our group, and I'm sure in other groups too, we have subgroups of locations. So there are groups for specific areas, and they get together for lunch, and social media is a nice way to dip your toe into the water without having to make a huge commitment.
That's such a good point. Some logistical questions. This one comes from Doreen on Facebook. She says, can I reclaim my kid's bedroom when he goes off to college, or should I leave it as it was for a while? And my personal addition to that, for a while, what period of time? She says she's tempted to take it and repurpose it, but she doesn't want to hurt his feelings.
Yeah, I would say at least until your child is out of college, at least until then, have a place for him or her to come home to. I think you can still repurpose part of the room. You can use it for I mean, I took part of my daughter's room when she left for college and turned it into a workspace for when I was in interior design school, and I had a desk and shelves with all my supplies. She didn't care, but they do need to have a place to call their own when they come back, especially if they're going to come back for the summer or for, long vacation. You don't want them feeling displaced. But once they're out of college, it's a free-for-all. Do whatever you want.
It's fair game.
It's your
Here's the
house.
couch. You're lucky to have a roof over your head.
Here's a futon. Make yourself at home. So, yeah.
Oh, I love you. Okay. Last couple of thoughts before we go. I thought this was great advice from Jan, who said, if your family is important to you, then you really are never an empty nester. Children may physically leave for a bit or a long while. They return to visit, to stay, or bring new members to the fold. It's a wonderful revolving door. And another thing I wanted to mention is, there were some people that were asking about military kids who've gone off into service and are gone for extended periods of time. I would invite, anybody who is a military mom or dad, if you've got expertise in this, because that adds a whole different wrinkle to the idea of your kid coming home from an extended deployment overseas, please weigh in wherever you're watching this or listening to this episode. We would love to hear your thoughts and your advice on how to manage that process. And Sharon, I guess I just want to close with you by asking you, what's the one thing about becoming an empty nester that maybe surprises people that they're not expecting, that you can, give us a spoiler alert on?
Oh my God, it's so much fun. It really is. It's so great to have all this room to do whatever you want to do. And a lot of people in my community say, "Oh, I don't know what I want to do," but you'll get there. You just have to be patient, and it's so nice to not have to be responsible for another little human being anymore. As it was a great. I mean, I wouldn't have changed a thing. I loved raising my kids. It's all I ever wanted to do was be a stay-at-home mom. But when they went, I was ready, and you will find your path too. And my kids, I talk to them all the time, and I think that's because they see that I'm independent of them, and I'm not needing them, and I'm not feeling like they've abandoned me.
Yeah.
I've given them plenty of room, and I think that makes a big difference for kids to know that their parents are doing okay.
Good points. Hey, thanks so much for your expertise on this. Thanks for joining us for That Expert Show. I really appreciate it, Sharon.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for being with us on this episode of That Expert Show. Sharon was awesome, hilarious, real. She loves her kids, but she was ready for them to move on to adulthood, as I'm sure many of us can relate to. Hey, you can always connect with me via social media between shows. I'm on Facebook at Anna Canzano. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at That Expert Show. And go back and watch previous episodes. We've got a bevy of episodes for you now on all kinds of lifestyle topics. So you can check out our YouTube channel, That Expert Show, as well as our podcasts. We kick this back out to you as a podcast if you just want to listen to the show as you're driving around, running errands or whatnot, or working out. We're on Apple iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify, and all those fancy platforms where you listen to podcasts. You can also go to thatexpertshow.com and check out our website. I'll create a tip sheet for this episode because Sharon shared so much great information. It's a shareable tip sheet that you can then pass along to your friends and family if you think that this information would help them. Maybe you've got parents that are empty nesters and you're like, hey, listen to what Sharon had to say. Thank you for joining us for this episode of That Expert Show. Hope you'll be with us next time, where you help run the show.